Good morning. Happy Easter. This is the time of year for spring cleaning. Now, I'm in the process of moving just next door to myself, so I'm doing my spring cleaning. I am. So I'm doing my spring cleaning while I pack and unpack. And you know what I've discovered? So much junk. So much junk, so much. I found curtains that I made for an apartment 6 apartments ago, and those windows were really weird, so I had to make them, and I still have them. They don't fit anywhere else, they only fit there. I found about 4 bins of half-finished craft projects that I know I'm never actually gonna finish. Yeah, I see some of you going, yeah, I've been there. I know I'm never gonna finish them, but I just can't throw them away. And I also found, this is so embarrassing, a legion of empty boxes that I've saved because they are really good boxes. Yes, you get it. I've never needed them, I've never used them, but I keep them. But do you know what else I found? I also found the label maker that my dear late husband used to use to make labels for things like the stapler that said stapler, and the printer, and the label said printer, and wife that he put on my forehead. I really appreciated that, just in case I forgot. But I also found this absolutely beautiful, super classy pair of lamps that I got 2 apartments ago that were so beautiful, and they didn't fit in the next place, and so I just packed them away, hoping that someday I would have a place they would fit, and in my new place, I already have the perfect spot for them, and I'm so excited to get to use them. It's great. It's been surprisingly fun to do all of this because I have a tried and true method that is methodical and efficient, and it makes the little organizational part of my brain just so happy. So first, I have to actually motivate myself to do it, and sometimes that's the hardest part, and I think there's a whole sermon in that, but we'll do that some other time. But once I'm motivated, then I completely will empty out the closet that I'm going to work on. I empty out that closet, I spread everything out on the floor, and I ask myself the following questions about every item. Do I still need this? Is it obvious garbage? Can I donate it? Can I sell it to somebody else who might use it? Even if it's not useful to me, is it valuable to me? How will I use or value this in the future so that it doesn't end up buried at the bottom of a closet again? So then I clean my closet top to bottom, and I reorganize everything back into the closet. And if I've done a good job answering those questions, that closet stays organized for the next year. And if it doesn't, that's what next year's spring cleaning is for. So I want you to imagine, just for a minute, doing regular spring cleaning on your faith. What does that look like? Just close your eyes for a minute and think about what would that look like to do spring cleaning on your faith. What does it look like when you open up that box that contains your faith? Are the contents long-loved antiques inherited from your grandparents? Are they well-worn tools that you handle and utilize every day? Are they little tiny seedlings, newly planted, that are just barely starting to unfurl their first leaves? Is that box completely empty? So let's dig a little bit deeper. When did your faith become your faith? Did you keep the same faith that you were raised with? I suspect for some of you in this room, that is indeed what happened. The faith of your youth was a good fit, and though it matured as you did, it has remained largely the same. Your faith comes as easy to you as breathing, and it's familiar and it's comfortable. God is who God has always been to you, a universal truth, a universal constant that you feel working in your life, and coming to church, whether it's in these pews or worshiping in other ways, that's an outward expression of that faith. That's a wonderful path, and you're really lucky if you've had that path. But I suspect that a larger number of you have, at some point in your life, had a dark night of the soul, as St. John of the Cross would say, for your faith. Maybe you and God had a very traumatic falling out and you are no longer on speaking terms. But maybe it wasn't so dramatic. Maybe it was the slow realization that the faith of your youth didn't quite fit. It was a little tight in the shoulders, it was a little long in the sleeve. Maybe you tried to tailor it to your measurements for a little while before you just sought out something else that fit better. For me, up until I was about 21 or 22 years old, I was a devout Mormon. I participated in at least 10 hours of church activities or education a week, including 3 hours of church every Sunday. You guys are so lucky. I read the Book of Mormon and the Bible cover to cover many times. I donated 10% of every paycheck to the church, and I lived the moral code of the church. That included never saying a single swear word, never seeing an R-rated movie, never drinking coffee, never drinking tea, never wearing a sleeveless top or shorts or shorts above the knee. I went to BYU, and I took about at least a dozen religious courses alongside my English degree. At the ripe old age of 19, I met a very good Mormon boy who had gone on a mission, and less than a year later, we were married in the Mormon temple. We were, by every definition, devout Mormons. Through all of this, on occasion, I had inklings of doubts in the things that I was taught, but they just made me assume that I was the problem. If I doubted, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough, I wasn't good enough. My faith was not the problem, I was the problem. I embraced a sort of fake it till you make it sort of mindset, hoping that if I lived it long enough, my faith would become stronger. The first real crack in my faith that I couldn't ignore was when one of my best friends in college, who was a gay man who was very heavily closeted at the time, he was unceremoniously kicked out from BYU in his last semester for having a dalliance with another man. The church had taught me that I should hate the sin, but I could still love the sinner. But it also told me that the only way a gay person could exist as a Mormon in good standing was to be celibate and single their whole life. And I knew in my heart of hearts that that wasn't right. I loved my friend so much, and I couldn't bear the idea of him not getting to have love, to have a family, to have a community that accepted every single part of him. So when that crack first appeared, I panicked. But that crack spread, and I couldn't ignore anymore the other things that I had closed my eyes to over the years, and everything started to crumble around me. And I was left with no other option than doing the biggest faith spring cleaning ever. So I utilized my tried and true method. I took every item out of the box, I sat with it, I examined it, I prayed with it. The whole Mormon church, discarded. The Bible, discarded. Organized religion, discarded. God, discarded. This process took me years to complete, and by the end, that box was completely empty. So I decided I was completely done with religion, and I said a very cheerful, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." And I gleefully threw out all of the babies with all of the bathwater. And it was amazing. It felt incredible. I felt like I had shed my skin and I was suddenly the truest version of myself. I was this Catherine that I had never been before, who was genuine and living with integrity for the first time in years. It was freeing. It was a breath of fresh air. And very, very slowly, the raw edges of the wounds that faith had dealt to me slowly healed over. Not long after that, I was hired to sing here as a section leader at St. Gregory's. And at first, it was just a job to pay the bills. But eventually, in your wonderful, delightful company, I felt safe enough to start to get curious about faith again. I saw how all of you were living your lives, not being guilted into behaving a certain way or doing things just because you were told that you had to, but because you were just genuinely trying to be good people and make yourselves and your community and the world around you just a little bit better. And I thought, I think this might actually be what faith looks like. So I became more curious about religion and how faith fit in people's lives, about how it changed them from the inside out. So because my second job is as a professional singer, I often sing for many different types of religious gatherings. And I loved hearing most of those religious leaders, instead of claiming a monopoly on truth with a capital T, they focused instead on how does this make you live your life with more love and more compassion for your fellow man? And through all this, my faith resurrected as this living and breathing and evolving part of who I am. And now it lives in this intentionally liminal space, in the cracks between the things that I hope are true. I've commandeered the phrase sacred mysteries from our Catholic siblings. There are things that I don't understand, but the not knowing makes them sacred to me. My faith inspires me to keep being curious, to keep evolving, to keep looking for who or whatever God might be in myself and in each of you and in the glory of the natural world around me. That's the faith of my today, although it might not be the faith of my tomorrow. What I've discovered is that what matters is that I am continuously engaging with my faith. And since your butt is here in this seat, I think that's what you're doing too. And regardless of whether your faith looks something like mine or whether it's completely different, that's not just okay, that's something to be celebrated. We are unique individuals shaped by our joys and our sorrows, and our faith is too. We are all here in this space together, seeking. Now, I bet you thought I was going to go this whole sermon without mentioning poor old doubting Thomas, didn't you? What a terrible name to be known by. I mean, really, he just happened to not be there when Jesus made his very dramatic comeback, and then he had the completely normal reaction of, I'll believe it when I see it. And he's suddenly defined by his doubt for the rest of time. It's so terrible. But the thing that I really appreciate about Thomas is the fact that even when everybody else saw Jesus back from the dead, and he didn't, he stuck around. He didn't say, you guys are crazy, I'm out of here. He didn't say, well, I guess I wasn't good enough to see Jesus, so I'm out of here. And the other disciples, they didn't say to him, well, you weren't here and you don't believe the same thing that we do, so you're out. And I feel like that really speaks to the camaraderie and the togetherness of all of the disciples of Jesus, don't you? They showed us that we don't need to have all the answers to be in these pews. We don't need to have the same answers to be in these pews. We don't have to see God the same. We don't have to have carbon copies of the same faith. We don't have to have all the answers to say, as it says in Hebrews, to provoke one another to love and good deeds. I love that. Because my own version of faith is ever-changing, I'm very cautious about using I believe statements. I almost never use them. But I say to you now, without any hesitation, I believe that St. Gregory's is a safe place for doing your spiritual spring cleaning. I know for a fact that we have every color of the spiritual spectrum represented in this room. This is a community where you are safe to sit and dump out the box of your faith. So that's my challenge for you today. Do your spiritual spring cleaning. You are safe here. Take down that box, empty it out on the floor, and as you take each item out of that box, ask yourself, is this part of my faith still relevant, still useful, still valuable to who I am today with all of the life experiences that I've had since the last time I did my spiritual spring cleaning? How can I use my faith, whatever that looks like, to provoke myself and the people around me to love and good deeds? Amen.